I hope I'm real serious. Right here. I know exactly what to do. This is Tafari McGetty. He's the leader of the workers. South Africa. So like before we start, I play like who the leader, you know.
Guru is the key Swahili word for freedom.
Play like
So that's how we open up, that's how we close it, that's how we take one another. So that's how we say goodbye. Uhuru means freedom, the key Swahili word. And as you know, our movement overall is known as the movement. Because that's what we are all about, fighting for the total liberation of Africa. So I just want to welcome everyone, allow more people to come in. So first, I just go ahead and introduce myself. I am Tafari Mugeri. I am the director of organization for the African and I just want to immediately start with my leadership. Chairman of my leadership, who is the leader and founder of the African Socialist International and the entire world. I also want to salute our Secretary General, who is Kinshasa, who is out of London. I also want to salute Deputy Chair Honors the entire Central Committee of
you know what I'm saying? I know
all the members of the party and the movement, and everyone that's on here. So I just want to salute you, comrades. So what we have on here is a membership drive for the Southern Africa region. Like we said, we are the ASI Africa region, and the ASI is an organization that comprises of its component organizations, and known as the African Socialist Party in the different countries. And like here in South Africa, we have the African Socialist Party of People Azania. And in Sierra Leone, we have the African People's Socialist Party Sierra Leone, just like in the USA, we have the African People's Socialist Party USA. And overall, our party is known as the ASI International. And here on the African continent, we are actually consolidating the building of the party, applying the regional strategy that has been laid out by Chimino since the 2018 7th Congress and the subsequent plenaries that took place in 2020 and 2021. And I just want to announce that we are going to our at the same time, I believe I understand it take place on February 29th. That's the other side. So we're making out how we're going to move forward the next year until 2023, where we'll be having a congress, the first international congress of the African Socialist Party, which is going to be hosted by us here, the APS people, as I will be the host here, right here in South Africa, in this colony, in this central colony known as South Africa. So we are looking forward to that and want to call on everyone to participate in this process of chatting towards
and if necessary die. But I'm not trying to die. But if somebody want to take it to the level,
drive,
I'll do everything in my power, so you know what I'm saying, do with it.
we are calling on all African people, especially the African middle class, to join in and become members of the party. Writing so and we have the party here in Tanzania, known as Africa, and we also have the party in Swaziland. So you can join in, the structures are already in place, but then we also want to encourage our people, African people who may be located in places where we don't have yet have the party, like in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, and all these other colonies, that you can become a member of the party and appreciate the process of building this organization right there in your location. So the program is in place, comrades, and I just want to say with me, I have the regional committee, the Southern Africa Regional Committee. I am the chair of the committee, and we have the recruitment and membership coordinator for the committee for the Southern Africa Regional Committee, and that is Moses Wani. I know he's been experiencing network challenges because it's raining. Network is always an issue here. And also we have comrade Luigi Munoz, who is the economic development coordinator for the Southern Africa Regional Committee, and on the background, we also have the Agitprop coordinator for the Southern Africa region, Muhao Letai. Yeah. So welcome, comrades. Please share this live, share it everywhere, and also engage with the program. And if you're not yet a member of the African Socialist Party, we hope that this will encourage you to join in and become a member of the party. So, Uhuru, comrades. So the first thing that we're going to do in terms of the program, I'm going to read a piece here from Temino Maria Shitela, and this is from a document that was written in 1979. So our party was founded in 1972. And this is a
I thought I would speak.
But this one is page.
I got to go.
So this is a pamphlet. It's known as the New Period in Time of Party Building by Chairman Omani from 1979.
I want to get affiliated, but right now,
I've just wanted to see this pamphlet together with other
everything has order.
From the Agitprop department, from the Benin media, led by director Akila Anai. So we want to submit our leadership in that department. So I'm going to be reading here from page 58 of this document. And we just want to look at the context in which, our party developed, being born from the ashes of the defeat of the African liberation movement or the Black Revolution of the 1960s. As we know that in the 1960s, it was an revolutionary movement everywhere. People were fighting for
just right now.
Get rid of the imperialist, to get rid of the colonizer. We saw that in the late 1940s in China and in India, and also in the 1950s, we see the rise of the Mau Mau Kenya, the victory of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, and in 1960, more than a dozen African colonies gaining independence, and all over the world, including in Vietnam. From the Sierra Leone Mountains, Arnold for Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, and even in the United States, where the power movement emerging, the Black Panther Party, and as well as organizations such as Jomo, the organizations he was a revolutionary.
Think like me, you hear me?
That revolution was destroyed.
You know what I mean? And I wake up every morning and I ask God,
that is meant to be
whoever he is, whatever he is, to lead me and direct me. Not because
So
the white man said
we are reading here
anybody say, but whatever you
on the
take
subject
to it and open
the
up our
creation
vessel
of the
to be an
African
instrument.
International, the preliminary aspects of which should be
After three,
accompanied
I'm
by
gonna
what?
three.
The creation of the African Space International is the key element of the party's strategy to encircle U.S. imperialism diplomatically.
You got me.
But the need for the African Space International is greater than this need for the African liberation struggle here in the U.S. Indeed, the African Socialist International is fundamental to our theory of African internationalism. That's our political theory. It's called African internationalism, and we also refer to it as Ayeshitelism because the chairman is the person responsible for the development of this political theory, which is a theory or a philosophy from the viewpoint of the slave, as opposed to the slave master or the colonizer. That is, the united struggle to the struggle of African people to liberate and unify Africa under socialism as our main task in the struggle for world communism. So the greatest manifestation of this political theory of African internationalism is actually in the existence of the African Socialist International everywhere. That's the practical application of African internationalism. You cannot be an African African internationalist and go some other direction. It has to be to the African Socialist International. Then he says, comrade, the struggle of African people throughout the world have been said with many problems as we are directly colonized in some places and victims of neocolonialism in other places. Neocolonialism is white power in it's part of counterinsurgency, by the way. It's a result of the enemy to put in office like people who look like the colonized people, like Barack Obama or Nelson Mandela, but the problem is still the same. The relationship between the colonizer and the colonized is still maintained. Our resources inside Africa and our leaders still to create wealth and comfort for the colonizer. We are subject to terror and oppression in virtually every place we exist on the face of the earth. In almost every instance, the struggles we are waging are being waged either in isolation or without the objective unity of interest that the common historical determined density of our people demands for true liberation. So we cannot fight in isolation. We are reading here on page 8 on a subsection that says the creation of the African International, the preliminary aspects of which should be accomplished by mid-1. The creation of the African Socialist International is the key element of the party's strategy to encircle U.S. imperialism diplomatically. But the need for the African Socialist International is greater than this need for the African liberation struggle here in the U.S. Indeed, the African Socialist International is fundamental to our theory of African internationalism. That's our political theory. It's called African internationalism, and we also Ayeshitelism because the chairman is the person responsible for the development of this political theory, which is a theory or a philosophy from the viewpoint of the slave, as opposed to the slave master or the colonizer. That is, the united struggle to the struggle of African people everywhere to liberate and unify Africa under socialism as our main task in the struggle for world communism. So the greatest manifestation of this political theory of African internationalism is actually in the existence of the African Socialist International everywhere. That's the practical application of African internationalism. You cannot be an African African internationalist and go some other direction. It has to be to the African Socialist International. Then he says, comrade, the struggle of African people throughout the world have been said with many problems as we are directly colonized in some places and victims of neocolonialism in other places. Neocolonialism is white power in black face. It's part of counterinsurgency, by the way. It's a result of the enemy to put in office like people who look like the colonized people, like they were Barack Obama or Nelson Mandela, but the program is going to say the relationship between the colonized and the colonized will maintain. Our resources being sucked out of Africa and our labor being exploited to create wealth and comfort for the colonizer. You know, we are subject to terror and oppression in virtually every place we exist on the face of the earth. In almost every instance, the struggles we are waging are being waged either in isolation or without the objective unity of interest that the common.
Uhuru. This is Black No Cop Zone. Uhuru comrades. Uhuru. This is Black No Cop Zone, the official political education and recruitment platform for Black community control and police of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. My name is Diop Olubala. I'm a proud member of the Black Community Control and Police Working Group, and I've been doing this particular session for a while, and we do this so that African people, particularly the African working class, can have an explanation of what's going on in the world from our own perspective. And when I say our own perspective, that's in accordance with the revolutionary theory of African internationalism. What's up, bro? Hey. Yeah. So it's important that we have that because there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. Everything from the so-called coronavirus and the many strands that are proven to be more and more immune to the vaccine, which challenges the basis for the imperialist ruling class, forcing masses of people to get the vaccine in the first place, and a situation that has contributed greatly to mass uprising from oppressed peoples, as well as within the imperialist white nation itself. And we have all types of imperialist wars and neo-colonial proxy wars taking place in Africa that we talk about. We talk about the situation in Haiti. And we want to, just off the rip, the situation in Haiti that we do want to specifically speak to is the reported release of the 12 or the 15 white missionaries that were kidnapped allegedly by an organization known as 400 Morozo. And according to various news reports, they now saying that the white people have been released. And prior to that, they had released 2 of them, at least according to imperialist media. And of course, imperialist media has, from the onset of that particular struggle, has criminalized this sector of the African working class that they characterize as gangs. However, in this instance, there's nothing that I can see up on the standpoint of Black community control and police that needs to be criticized about kidnapping some white missionaries. And I say that, and we actually did some sessions on this question, but it's important that we understand this because we look at Haiti, who is a victim of colonial assault on the part of French colonialism, on the part of the US government that invaded Haiti only for its own self-serving purposes, and as it left, literally robbed Haiti's treasury. We look at a situation where white missionaries, the only reason why white missionaries and the white church exists in African communities around the world has been to facilitate the interests of imperialism, to justify the slave master relationship. So based on this particular relationship that missionaries have had with African colonies around the world, there is nothing, objectively speaking, there's no contradiction in Africans detaining these forces for stepping foot in liberated territory. And when I say liberated territory, to the extent that those forces had the ability to kidnap the white people, that defines how liberated that territory was. And also having the ability to release them without any consequence speaks to a degree of control that sectors of the African working class have in Haiti. And that's something that we really have to recognize. And but the problem emerged at the point that there's no representation of the African working class, particularly on the ground during that situation, that would have had the ability to justify their acts and to say that as part of the struggle to liberate Haiti, we are imposing a policy of African community control of immigration, meaning that the only ones who are allowed to step foot in this country are those who have been given such permission by this revolutionary organization that has the power. And that power should not be wielded in the interests of any self-serving sector of the population. That power must be wielded in the interest of the African working class itself, so that the power doesn't just mean kidnapping some white people, but it means electricity, education, healthcare, housing, and all the other material needs of the workers in Haiti. So it's important that that be said, because outside of that, to condemn those Africans or to lay silent on their actions is objectively to be in unity with imperialism and bourgeois morality, which is the only argument that the imperialists have to lean on when they attack these Africans for kidnapping the white people. Because they don't make a self-criticism for kidnapping black people, not only from Africa 400 years ago, but in the form of the prisons and what the police do right now. So how in the hell can we respect their moral code on the question of kidnapping when it concerns these white people, but they goddamn, but at the same time, what about our fucking political prisoners? What about goddamn H. Rap Brown? What about Mumia? They want to talk about kidnapping. The U.S. government got Mumia held hostage right fucking now. Real shit. So, but we supposed to be some kind of slave or servant. We supposed to be some kind of slave or servant to the goddamn emotional whim of white people. And that's at the fucking end of the day, that's all that shit come down to. So, and we said that in a certain kind of way before, but what we want to say at this point was that although the decision to let these white people go is theirs to make, and they may have had some concrete reasons for doing that, but what must be said from the revolution is that these comrades have to unite with the African Socialist International that was just represented by Comrade Tafari Mugeti, who is the director of organization for our Africa work, and the African Socialist International is the organization that has the ability to systematize and make into a program the material demands and interests of the African working class, so that if and when you kidnap some white people, you have the ability to say that such act is based on the democratic right of African people to wield state power and to determine who's allowed to transgress the borders that we have proclaimed to be liberated territory. That's what, the only contradiction that we can see in that situation. Now check this out, y'all. This is the Burn the Spear newspaper. It's not the most, this is a month old, and that's my fault. I ordered the new one, but for some reason I didn't bring it with me tonight. But I want to be clear that my inability to move the Spear, or the most up-to-date issue of the Spear here right now, or anywhere I might be walking in these streets, is not a reflection of my political unity with the African Socialist International, the African People's Socialist Party, or Chairman Amadi Yeshitela. It just means that I forgot the shit. Kind of like sometimes I forget vital tools necessary for me to make money, right? My bike shut down and I forgot the fuses at home. So I want to be clear that the contradiction isn't a lack of unity as such, but it is rooted in a small degree of disorganization, which is largely based on the fact that I'm not accountable to an organization at this particular moment. And that breeds more chaos. But with that said, I'm still out here. I just met a brother that wants to come in based on the fact, yo, I've been seeing you and I've been hearing, and he wants to get down. So even though I didn't bring the Spear, we still building, So anyway, and the other thing I want to say is that to dive into the topic of today's political education session is cut off the head, destroy the body. And when we say head, we're talking about the base in colonial capitalist society, which we will define in the write-up. And when we say the body, we're talking about the superstructure within colonial capitalist society. And that headline is tied to the demand for Black community control of the police, which is the strategic blow that imperialism cannot survive, because the linchpin, the nerve center of U.S. imperialism, the same imperialism that is attacking our people in Ethiopia, Haiti, and other fronts of the African world, is headquartered right here. And the fact of the matter is that the police and the colonial state apparatus as a whole, which is located here, is can be defeated by African resistance and strategic revolutionary struggle. So we say you have to attack the base of society in order to see a deterioration of the superstructure of society. And what that means exactly will be further explained in this write-up. But it's important because the reason why we're having this discussion in the first place, last week, we did a presentation on the so-called escalation, record numbers of gun violence, what imperialist media calls it. They call it gun violence because they want to make the contradiction, the fact that Black people have guns. And, you know, and the record numbers have led to an intensification of stop and frisk. They say that they took 6,000 guns off the streets this year, or they're on pace to take 6,000 guns off the street. And this is their response to the contradiction of what they call gun violence, which really is just a cloak to disguise the real political objective, which is to disarm the Black community. But anyway, part of what, the reason why we're having this discussion today is because when we talked about the horizontal violence that sometimes does occur and may be bad in certain parts of the country in terms of what they call Black on Black violence. And, I was in discussion with a comrade type friend kind of situation, and they were saying, yeah, but what do we do, right? And actually sent this person, the write-up, our official position on the matter, which actually the whole last page says concretely what must be done, which is to attack the base, because what we know is horizontal violence is a part of the superstructure. It is an artificially, and it's an imposed type of contradiction on the community that's instigated by the manipulation of various economic and political factors, but primarily the standing army known as the police. Because think about it, if everything was free, like literally, if everything was free, then what the hell would we be fighting over? You know what I mean? Really. And think about that shit and get back to me. So, but everything is nothing is free. And this system is based on the driving an infinite, unsatiable need on the part of the colonial capitalist ruling class for profit, for money, cash. So everything costs, right? And so, and if you don't pay, then that is what the state is. That's what the police is for. If you take the shit out of the store without paying for it, they call the police. If you don't pay the rent, they call the police. If you don't pay the hospital bill, everything, it leads back to, because the police and the state apparatus, as Chairman Amada Yeshitela has taught us over and over again, the state is the instrument of violence and coercion that emerges in human society at the point where there's a class split in human society, meaning where there's a split between haves and have-nots, especially when the haves have it as a consequence of expropriating it from the have-nots, who are the workers, who are the producers of value and wealth in all of society. But it goes further. And but my comrade was saying, what do we do? So, and that led me to say, because I thought I was clear, this is what we do. We attack the base. And our strategy to attack the base is this, and we'll talk about that strategy later on in the discussion, but we have a concrete strategy to attack the base, which would one objective of which is to build a social movement on the ground. You know what I'm saying? Where everybody is saying Black community control the police or the pigs must go. What's going on? You know what I'm saying? You're good, bro. Yeah. And so that is a vital component of the key goal, which is to destroy the base of society, the police, the ones that make sure you pay, right? So, so that's what led me to this whole discussion regarding the base and the superstructure, because we say as Black community control. Because another thing that must be said is that in response to the violence, because there's 1,000 different ways. I didn't do the research, but I'm pretty sure that it's been a lot more than 580 Black people that died in the city of Philadelphia this year, and that's the number that they officially say is how many gun killings has been in the city this year. But the point is that it's not even as though that's the primary cause of death in the Black community in terms of horizontal violence, Africans killing each other. Because you have a situation where Black people die every day. High blood pressure, heart attack, diabetes, asthma, goddamn HIV, coronavirus. It's 1,000 different ways that Black people is dying every single day. So there's a reason why certain forces in society want to make the so-called gun violence the issue. And the reason is political, because the gun is the only thing that the African working class has in its possession that's going to really deal with all the other ways that we are dying, by getting the power to control the hospitals and shit like that. You know what I mean? So that's why everything we do and say comes back to the question of attacking the base and destroying the base in society. So that's what I was telling my friend in terms of the what do we do. And again, the whole question of why does horizontal violence occur in the community in the first place is a part of this question of the primary contradiction and the secondary contradiction in society. Because, for example, if you get a cold or any kind of virus, then you're going to experience symptoms of runny nose, headache, whatever, right? And it doesn't matter how many times you blow your nose or how many times you take headache medicine until you deal with the virus that's behind the symptoms. The symptoms are not going to disappear. So it's not as though attacking the symptoms over and over and over and over again is going to bear any real tangible and positive results in terms of stopping the symptoms. Yeah, you got to get to the germ. You have to attack the virus itself. And that's an analogy. That's like a metaphor we use to describe this concept of the base of society and the superstructure of society. The base of society is the germ itself. You know what I'm saying? It is the colonial capitalist system itself, which is really like saying one and the same thing. We're saying the colonial capitalist state. And then the superstructure in society, that's the symptoms of colonial capitalism. You know what I'm saying? All the bullshit that you got to go through every day is part of the superstructure. And horizontal violence itself is part of the superstructure. It is a symptom of colonial domination that African people experience. But it doesn't matter. If every Black person today decided to stop killing one another, we would still be getting fucked up by white power. Still. So, and do the knowledge, for real.
That's about control.
Comrade, and this is going to lead us to our next point, because there's a reason why certain forces, dog, listen to this, because this is what you got to know. When you expose the fucking fakes and the frauds, listen. It's a reason why these forces, try to make you focus on the symptom, because they work for the fucking virus. Real shit. There's a reason why these forces want you to focus on the symptom, because they work for the fucking virus. And that's how you know. Because I just ran off the logic. You can't, nobody can refute what the fuck I just said. How the fuck is you gonna get rid of a cold by blowing your nose and dealing with the symptoms? They know that shit. And it's the same thing with the goddamn system. But the most important thing that we have to understand is that the colonial state, the police, the prisons, the courts, the organization of violence and coercion, that's the only way that the colonial system can function. Because what would they do? How would they take you into slavery if they didn't have whips, chains, and guns?
Have agreeing and disagreeing.
What?
You have to agree and disagree. Like they don't want everybody to like and do what they want. That's how they make theirs. That's how they get.
Well, we're gonna have Q&A because I see where this is going. We're gonna have like a section of the thing dedicated to a discussion. This is how we do the format, because I know where this is. You know, but I have to go through the presentation. Yeah, just listen, and then we can have a discussion. Real shit. You know what I mean? Because I have to be disciplined with that one. And I'm out here, you know what I'm saying, to build an organization. So if we get liberal and sloppy now, then it gets worse every day. Yeah. All right, I got you. So I'm gonna read this shit, man, but that's what needs to be said, y'all. We have to get into the discussion about attacking the base. And when we say forces that don't want you to attack the base in a real way, that's because they got class interests. You have class contradictions in the black community. And not all sellouts look like Al Sharpton. In the final analysis, the sellout is the one that stands between black people and the strategy and organization necessary to get the power we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Real shit. So, you know, what I tell these forces that want to center all their activity around the symptoms is that what is your stance on what I'm saying? Like, what's your distance? And people bring up shit like spirituality and all this dumb shit, you know what I mean? They got nothing to do with paying bills and shit. Like, your boss don't want to hear that shit about spirituality and shit when you ain't did what the fuck you supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? Pico don't give a fuck about your spiritual. Listen to me. Yo, Pico don't give a fuck about your spiritual beliefs when it's time to pay that fucking bill, right? But for some reason, the movement is supposed to base our objectives off of spirituality and shit. Come on, man. I was just watching, they trying to say that Haiti was on some voodoo. That's why Haiti revolution won. That's bullshit. That's white people and petty bourgeois lies. Because the fact is that Mackendal, the first revolutionary that arose, he was from Africa and shit. And he was the first one, way before Dessalines and them. Mackendal was organizing all the slaves and shit to revolt. And this motherfucker was using biological warfare. Mackendal, the slave and shit. He knew all the plants and herbs and shit in the forest. And he could make poisons to kill the white people and shit. And somebody snitched him out. You know what I'm saying? And they caught him and they burned him at the stake. And he said, yo, don't worry, y'all, because I'm going to return as a mosquito. I'm going to return as a mosquito and I'm going to terrorize these white people again. And later on, the Haitian Revolution won in 1804. And the primary factor in that shit was actually the yellow fever, which was transmitted by the mosquito. That don't mean that he really turned into a mosquito, but he understood the relationship between like how to use nature as a weapon. This is the quest. This is a materialist approach. They say it's voodoo. No, nigga, it's science. Mackendal understood that you can wield nature. You can use nature as a weapon to defeat your enemy. That's guerrilla shit, man. So, and the class understands that shit to this day. But, you know, we talking about Haiti. I'm just saying, like, this is what we got to understand when we move this shit forward. So we're gonna get into this write-up about the base and superstructure. And fam, we out here every Thursday night. Let me get your man for your angles before you know what I mean, before you slide. I want to make sure that we link, all right? I know your bro, it's Amp, right? Your bro, that's your man's, right? Amp, that's your man's, right? So we in touch, all right? That's what's up. So
he watch my ass.
Yeah,
sure
yeah, that's what's up. I just want to make sure
when we stop there, right?
Yeah,
I'm doing what we doing.
Yeah,
I'm listening.
Yeah,
and I think you used to be around the corner on the next block.
Yeah,
and that's what we
same shit. We saying
the painting and stuff.
Yeah, bro.
All right.
Yeah.
This is where I was listening to you, right?
Yeah.
It's not discriminating against nobody. It's not.
It's science.
It was like that. Yo, listen to him.
Yeah.
It's science. It's genetic.
Yeah.
It's genetic. If
Yeah.
we fall victim to it,
Yeah.
now you win it. That's like us stopping here. Here. It's limiting your shit. Cutting it till you cut it out. Because that's poison in a sense.
It's good that you know you recognize
it's crazy.
that shit.
It's crazy.
Do the science. Because that's the thing.
That's why I said, look where you at. Speaking the truth. Not for nobody to come and just interrupt you.
This is a whole other subject.
It was just
but I feel what you're saying.
It was just deep.
Yeah.
And I salute you. I don't know how long I'm staying here.
But listen. Because like it's science to everything. And if you recognize this be a contradiction and sipping on that, you know, you need to be able to run it down. Like how? How? Why is it a contradiction? Why is it a problem?
It all in our face and it's a problem.
But why though, man? What about it is hurtful? What's the problem exactly?
You look, it's all balance.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay.
Number one, it leaves you to be negative. Period. You could be in a great state. but you could be stressing or in your head about something, right? Or there's something that you've been going through, and you'll find yourself, you know what I need? Either weed, a cigarette to try to calm you down, or what? Liquor, or liquor, or a deeper drug, right? So now we ain't going to get this shit.
Well, you had me with the off balance part. That's the problem. You can't do nothing if you're off balance.
After I got beer, right?
Yeah,
for a reason.
I agree with you.
I got beer for a reason. If I get hard liquor, EJ or Honey, I'm a different character.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that person.
Right.
Look, 2 cups of beer. Yeah. I know my limit. I got to drive. I got to still be responsible.
When you say you a different character, what you mean? You know how to get home?
Yeah. Being seen, I heard. Reading, having knowledge. Look.
We getting far. We gotta do a whole section on this.
I know you're gonna go right back there. Soon let me say this.
But I'm with you.
I don't know how many people done walked by you or how long you been here since I pulled up. But just me and you stopping and just talking, right? Yeah. We just built both our energy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, both our energy, brother. I'll stand a little longer, or rather I'll leave.
I gotta get into this, comrade. Because you taking me off point, comrade. You taking me off point, and we all here with no mask. And I know what I know what these people be saying, and that's what the fuck. I gotta act like a goddamn security guard, and you know what I mean? I don't wanna be like that. But you know, I gotta be on point, comrade. So, yo, Bomb, Uhuru, my man, you know what it is, bro. Yeah, all right.
Yo, I heard that.
Yeah. That was at the meeting, man. But yeah, I agree with you on the alcohol question, man. Get rid of this shit. Yeah. All right. But for real, man, because you peoples, man, so I don't want to, you know, and I've been criticized for that before. Uhuru. Yeah. All right, y'all. Uhuru. So we building this shit. We building Black No Cop Zone, you know, and so it's not going to be a perfect process, but the point of it is that it serves as a front upon which we conduct outreach to the people. You know what I mean? And that's a really important thing because we used to do this shit inside. But if we did it inside, that's like, you know, how long are we going to spend out here? An hour and a half, less time that we can be out with the people doing some form of outreach. And we just saw how we basically recruited a brother and we connected with an older contact. You know what I'm saying? So the shit has obvious value in the sense of building organization on the ground. But at the same time, we do believe in discipline. On some real shit, I believe that the immune system is the primary, it should be the primary front of defense against the COVID vaccine, the COVID-19. And but I also uphold socialist distancing, which includes the wearing of our masks. So you know, that is not how we get down on a regular. But what I want to do is read the statement that we said: cut off the head, destroy the body. On violence and revolutionary transformation as African internationalist rebuttal to Marxist theory on base and superstructure. It starts in revolutionary and socialist theory. It is understood that society consists of 2 parts, the base or substructure and the superstructure. The base refers to the mode of production or colonialism, which includes the forces and relations of production, which could include the employer, but most importantly, the colonial state and its repression and colonial policy. And by employer, we mean the colonial capitalist ruling class, really. Employee work conditions, the technical division of labor, household and community economic and political organization, and property relations into which people enter to produce the necessities and amenities in life. Some of that was taken from a quote, basically, in Wikipedia that deals with the question of base and superstructure. But we made some revisions to it because it does not include, as a mode of production, colonialism, nor does it include the colonial state in the base. But that's the critical thing that we have to understand. And there's a reason why, and this is written by Marxists, you know what I mean? And the thing about Marxism is that it's a philosophy that was born out of an entirely European experience, and essentially is written from the perspective of the white proletariat, if you want to call it that whose exploitation by the capitalist ruling class rests upon the pedestal of colonialism, pure and simple. And although Marx does mention that colonialism, slavery in America, the theft of the land of the indigenous people of North America, you know, he recognizes as a small footnote in Das Kapital that this was something that was absolutely necessary for the existence of primitive accumulation of capital in terms of its starting point, the starting point of capital in the capitalist society. He has to trace that back to slavery, colonialism, etc. But what Marx, and this is the chairman talking right now, I don't want to act like I made this shit up. We all know that I'm a student and a follower of Omali Yeshitela, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. But it's absolutely necessary to give a real, a correct and thorough overview on anything. We have to be able to say this type of thing because our criticism of Marx and his theory is part of our criticism or how we redefine the base and superstructure in capitalist society, or we understand to be colonial capitalist society. We have to be able to criticize Marx. And so the thing is that, and we're going to talk about this later on in the reading, but Marx's theory in terms of the development of human society, it starts with saying that human society started with primitive communalism. And in a primitive communalist society, the primary contradiction was between human society itself and nature. You know what I mean? Just staying alive, surviving the elements, wild animals trying to kill you, the weather, etc. But as a consequence of overturning numerous contradictions within that situation, according to Marx's framework, that communalist, communal primitive society evolved into feudal slavery, where the primary contradiction was then between slaves and slave masters. And he's not talking, he's speaking from a European perspective. When he talks about slavery, he's not even talking about the African colonial capitalist slave experience. He's talking about slavery as it existed in European society, like Spartacus and Romans taking people for gladiators type shit. And so in the slave society, the primary contradiction is between the slave and the slave master. And then as a consequence of those contradictions of revolts and revolutions, so to speak, on the part of the slave, then a new ruling class in society, in European society, emerges under the feudalist society. And so now you no longer have slavery, but you have the feudal society, where essentially the primary contradiction is between like the monarchy, the royalty, etc., biologically determined ruling class over the serfdom. You know what I mean? The mass of the people who work like under sharecropper like situation where everything they made had to be handed over to the king and shit, the sheriff of Nottingham and whatnot, And so, you had the feudal state that was in the form of knights of armor and, the sheriff of Nottingham, etc., whose responsibility was to maintain the status quo in that society. And then what Marx says happens after feudal society is the emergence of capitalist society. He says, out of overturning the contradictions within the feudal society that existed between the serfdom and the monarchy, a new ruling class emerges in the form of the bourgeoisie or the capitalists, who came to power as a consequence, essentially, of its own form of revolution. But, when we use the term revolution, we don't use it, in a blanket, well, it is a blanket definition in the sense that it is transformation within the society and power, the relinquishment of state power and political power from one social force to another. And the reality is that this has always been a violent process. But the thing is that because Marxists cannot see colonialism, because the primary contradiction in capitalist society is between the capitalists and the proletariat or the working class, right? But again, Marx defines all this shit within a European-centered context. So when he talks about the proletariat, he's talking about white workers and the factories of Liverpool and shit, you know what I mean? England, and so again, according to Marx's theory, the primary contradiction within the capitalist society is between those white workers and the capitalist itself, the bosses, right? And according to Marx, once that contradiction is overturned, then we will go into socialism and then communism. So, but the thing is that, again, Marx does not recognize that the real class contradiction in capitalist society is concentrated in the colonial question. Because again, in order for white workers anywhere on the planet Earth to have a job where they can complain about exploitation, you got to have the expropriation of raw materials from the colonies, from territories and peoples who are under the political and economic domination of white power. That's the only way that bauxite in a mine in Guinea-Conakry could end up in the form of steel in a car factory at one point in a place like Detroit or Chicago, right? And that's not to say that African workers do not work in car factories. However, the relationship that African workers have with the bourgeoisie or the capitalists is entirely different than the relationship that white workers have with the capitalists. And so, kind of like how during slavery, on the Middle Passage, they say we was in the same boat. And the reality is that, yeah, well, the white people were the staff. You know what I mean? They was the ones cracking the whip and, you know, making the meager food for us to eat and shit like, well, they didn't actually, they held the whip. That's all they did. And they forced us to do everything else, you know? And then you had Africans in that same boat. And there was an entire, some kind of economy on a slave ship. And North America can be understood to be a big ass slave ship in the sense that the economy is dominated by the same force. And the experience that Africans have in the slave boat in North America is entirely different than the experience that white workers have. And there's numbers that can be spitted out right now. Like the average white family controls 8 times more wealth than the average black family in the US right now. And there's other numbers related to violence. Police are likely to kill an African man 5 times more than a white man and shit like that. So the reality is that Marx's analysis is flawed in the sense that he does not recognize the colonial contradiction, right? But that's not to say Marx is a bad guy, because he may have been politically honest enough to revise that error, to make a self-criticism. Had he been exposed to the workings of Chairman Amali Yeshitela, because, you know, he was a revolutionary and he dedicated a lot of time to developing aspects of revolutionary and economic theory that even we as African internationalists find extremely useful. So he was a dedicated communist in a certain kind of way. But the reality is that Marxists organizations that exist today do know about Chairman Amali Yeshitela. You know what I'm saying? But they choose to not relinquish their control over these opportunist white left organizations and do the principal thing, which is to join the African People's Socialist Solidarity Committee, which is the organization that gives white people the ability to function within the revolution under the correct leadership of the advanced detachment of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party. And there's nothing that any white left person can say right now that can refute what we're saying right now. They can't. They can't argue this down. So what they do is, or they just hope that you don't have access to this information so as to enable you to turn your backs on them and their imperialist bosses. And the reason why we say imperialist bosses, this is getting into the question of why we're talking about this in relationship to the question of the base and the superstructure. And a lot of the shit is actually well explained by the chairman. But, you know, it's like I want to spit it, you know, in this kind of way. And then, you know, he talks about Bernie Sanders, you know, and a lot of white left forces that found themselves having the ability to unite with Bernie Sanders and even regarding him as a socialist based on some, you know, ridiculous $15 an hour, which is not even enough to pay for a 1-bedroom apartment in most major cities, you know. But anyway, we're going to talk about it, y'all. So in revolutionary and socialist theory, it is understood that society consists of 2 parts, the base or substructure and superstructure. The base refers to the mode of production, which is colonialism, which includes the forces and relations of production, the employer, the capitalist boss, the colonial capitalist boss, colonial state and its repression and colonial policy, employee work conditions, the technical division of labor, household and community, economic and political organization, and property relations into which people enter to produce the necessities and amenities of life. The superstructure refers to society's other relationships and ideas not directly relating to production, including its culture, economic and financial institutions, political power structures, and legal and judicial system, roles, rituals, religion, media, and state. And we talked about this, in terms of, how the superstructure differs from the base or the substructure, And the most important thing to know is that the base is the state. The state is the base. That's really what's going on, bro. You know what I'm saying? That's really all you really got to know if you were a real communist. So Marx and Engels say that the state and its laws is a part of the superstructure. We as African internationalists disagree. We assert that the colonial state is a part of the base itself and must be the strategic target of socialist revolutionary struggle. Also, I want to say that we don't just point to the question of the colonial question simply because we just want to be in the center and we whining and recognize us and our pain as colonized subjects. No, we point to the colonial question because white people cannot lead the revolution. The revolution for socialism and communism requires the overturning of colonialism. It requires successful national liberation struggles, but at the same time, these struggles are waged, they must be led by the proletariat of such oppressed nation. So the struggle for the liberation of Vietnam must be led by the Vietnamese proletariat, and so on and so forth. It's not simply a question of anybody declaring so-called independence, because the term independence itself has a class character. So, but getting back to the question of why we raise up the colonial question, because colonialism is the basis of colonial capitalist society. There cannot be any capitalism without colonialism, pure and simple. And therefore, the white left, which is a part of the so-called white working class, they will never be able to recognize that, because their material wealth and political power and influence in society as a whole is based on colonialism as well. So they can't come to that conclusion on their own, and that's why Marx could not. But the slave, the victim of colonialism that has the most objective view and understanding of colonialism and capitalism can lead. Only the African working class can lead. So, and I believe that shit. So, and we're gonna dig in. You know what I mean? I see forces stepping forward. We're gonna dig in. That's how we built, for real. So Marx and Engels say that the state and its laws is a part of the superstructure. We as African internationalists disagree. We assert that the colonial state is a part of the base itself and must be the strategic target of socialist revolutionary struggle. This position is based on the fact that the state, whether the overseer or the police, has been the only entity ensuring colonial capitalist production. Why would we work for free in the cotton plantation if it wasn't for overseers with rifles threatening to kill us if we didn't? Why would we go to prison, work for free, and generate an entire political economy for the white settler colonial colonizer population if it was not for police kicking down doors? If it was not for police kicking down doors. That's why I did the overview. I know people are going to start tripping with the nonsense in this phone. Yeah. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela said, quote, class exploitation, the base, does not occur at the point of production, but at the point of the bayonet, unquote. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, that's the only way this capitalist thing works, is by the goddamn black community being held at gunpoint. And that provides the pedestal upon which white workers downtown in these gentrified areas, you know what I mean? That's how they gain access to the wealth, by stepping over the black community. The Marxists always say, at least historically, that is how it's gone down. But that's rapidly changing due to the party. The Marxists always say that the, quote, the relation of the base and superstructure is not strictly unidirectional. The superstructure can affect the base. However, the influence of the base is predominant. We disagree with this as well. when you analyze other models that reflect the base superstructure relationship, such as a virus in the human body, we know that struggling against the symptoms of a virus will never affect the virus itself. And we talked about that. And because Marxists, they say that the relationship between the base and the structure is it's not unidirectional, meaning that it doesn't just go from the base down, like the base influences the superstructure, but the superstructure also influences the base. But and that may be true to the extent that influence means some kind of reform, because you know institutions within the superstructure are the ones that would require police to wear body cameras and you know shit like that. But in the final analysis, all of that type of reform doesn't mean anything in terms of whether or not black people are gonna get killed by the police, you know, and whether or not you still gotta pay rent to the landlord and shit like that. So, yeah, pay rent to the landlord, you know. And some people might have a problem with the notion of rent being a criminal kind of like hijacking situation, a stick up, you know. But essentially, that's what it is. Because what gives you the right to charge somebody? And I'm not necessarily attacking any, because I understand that we live in a social system that, you know, until the base is destroyed, you can't just like make up a new society where you don't have to pay bills and landlords that some of them may be really like patriotic Africans and shit. But in order to maintain the quote unquote property, they got to pay city taxes and, you know, and pay for repairs and shit like that. So we live in a society where the, you know, some landlords are, you know, colonized subjects as well. And, you know, if given the opportunity, would be willing to engage in a different kind of relationship with the African working class. But, and that's why organization is so important, you know what I mean, to liberate that all these sectors of the community. But we have a problem in the fundamental sense with having to pay rent to the landlord, which is in the final analysis, the real landlord is the colonial capitalist ruling class. And what in the hell, at what point did they have the right to charge somebody to be here? You know, given the fact, you know, we know how they got here, you know, by killing the so-called Indians and shit, you know. So, and then they want to charge you to stay here when they drag your ass here, you know, like, but these are really important questions that, you know, we should be able to speak on it in a real objective way, but still with passion and fury and act on them, you know. And that's why sometimes we dissect minute questions like that so as to further fuel African resistance. You know, you have a right. You know what I mean? You have a right. You know, them Africans in LA and I think Minneapolis that ran up in the stores and fucking took Chanel bags, they have a right to do that shit. That's correct. You know what I'm saying? Them Africans that kidnapping white people in Haiti, they have a right to do that. Some real shit, they have a fucking right. You know? They have just as much a right to do it that the fucking crackers that got Mumia, right? You know what I'm saying? So, and white people, y'all just better duck. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is the fucking world we live in, you know? And that's why we got to build APSC. Let's see. No, don't duck, cause shit, you my target too. But listen, man, Chairman Yeshitela identified colonialism itself as a mode of production, and under capitalism, colonialism itself is the base. Let me read this apart. We disagree with this as well. When you analyze other models that reflect the base superstructure relationship, such as a virus in the human body, we know that struggling against the symptoms of a virus will never affect the virus itself. Chairman Omali Yeshitela identified colonialism itself as a mode of production, and under capitalism, colonialism itself is the base. And that has extremely important implications in terms of how we move. You know what I'm saying? I'm not just talking shit, because right now our movement is confronted with a problem where the only moves is really being made by city council forces and fucking the white left that is running, you know, various reform laws, police reform laws, requiring the pigs to wear body cameras, requiring the pigs to take sensitivity classes, etc., you know, tasers, all these reforms and shit. These are in the real world the Philly law that prohibits the pigs from stopping you for something less than a low-level offense or something. You know, all of this activity is occurring under the leadership of the petty bourgeoisie and the white left, and it's not going to result in these are symptoms that they are telling us to concentrate on, as opposed to getting at the virus itself, the base. And that's why we have to be able to make this distinction. And that's why we're doing this study. So, and Marxists think that it's unidirectional. They think that the relationship between the base and the superstructure is unidirectional because whether they know it or not, they stand for reform. Marxists and white leftists stand for reform. You know what I mean? And so for them, it's always about the next court date, the next trial to get the pig convicted and shit, as opposed to the destruction of the colonial capitalist state and revolutionary state power in the hands of the African working class and the working class of the indigenous peoples here. They can't put that out. So that's why, you know, this shit has, and this is, you know, something that the masses need to know, but this is how we would come at the petty bourgeoisie when we are given the opportunity. And we are zeroing in on them rapidly. So, in doing so, the chairman concretely disproved the Marxist model of the relationship shared between base and superstructure, showing that revolution is not the culmination of a smooth process that will occur on its own due to the changes that occur within the superstructure, but as a violent point of transformation resulting in the destruction of the base of society itself, which we understand to be colonialism and the colonial state. During the December 12th session of his weekly political education series entitled O'Malley Taught Me, the chairman said, quote, "We hear now from democratic socialists, the Bernie Sanders forces, who call themselves revolutionaries or seeking revolutionary conclusions, doing everything they can to put the damper on real change as it is trying to emerge in the world because it threatens their world. Bernie Sanders' world is threatened as much as Donald Trump's world. The democratic socialist world is threatened as much as the world of Donald Trump, or even the fascists that they suggest that they are opposed to." And I would include the fucking petty bourgeoisie in that category as well. The ones that insist on saying we gotta organize against black on black violence, or some of them got hip now. We gotta organize against horizontal violence, but they don't got no plan to attack the base. They don't got no plan to advance the objectives of black community control of the police. And that's real. They don't have a plan. We do. And to be honest with you, we've been standing 10 fucking toes down forever. There ain't been a time when we have not been prepared to move this shit forward. But it's always been the petty bourgeoisie that want to stand and raise up all these bullshit questions as a way to sabotage the forward struggle towards black community control of the police. I'm not lying. You can run off of history. Real shit. Run it down. Fuck out of here. All of this has changed because it is threatened by the real. Okay. Likewise, a revolutionary struggle to address the symptom, superstructure of the virus, base will not affect the base at all. You can't affect the base by fucking with the superstructure. You can't. Just like we said, you can't get rid of a cold by, dealing with the symptoms and not addressing the virus itself. It's common sense, but nobody puts it that way, and that's why we're here. The class enemies of the African proletariat install organization and ideology in our midst to obscure the primary contradiction. They promote reform. The democratic socialists like Sanders is one example, but essentially this criticism applies to all forces who have a material and objective interest in the preservation of the system of colonialism. The chairman exposes the ideological, and political basis of such reformist opportunism as he continues by quoting Maurice Cornforth in his pamphlet on dialectical materialism. Quote, Hegel points out, "It is as in the case of the birth of a child. After a long period of nutrition, the continuity of the gradual growth of size of quantitative change is suddenly cut short with the first breath drawn. There is a break in the process, a qualitative change, and the child is born." Marx followed up on this observation by Hegel. As for the ensuing bourgeois thinking, although the investigation of science and common experience itself clearly demonstrate that development cannot take place without discontinuity, without abrupt transitions and the leap from one state to another, they have nevertheless, in their general theories, tried to make unbroken continuity the law of evolution. Now I'm gonna say this real quick. The state sends forces to disrupt the shit. As you can hear, probably somebody's like making a lot of noise and maybe trying to mock me. I'm not sure. They can't like say what they really disagree with. They can't, refute any of these ideas, but sometimes the state will send these types of forces in our midst to disrupt the work that we're doing. But I want to make y'all, just aware of that shit. This prejudice in favor of a smooth line of evolution has gone hand in hand with the liberal belief that capitalist society will devolve smoothly through orderly bourgeois progress, broadening down from precedent to precedent. To have thought differently about evolution in general would have meant we would have to think differently about social evolution in particular. Chairman Yeshitela continued, quote, "This is what we hear now from the democratic socialists like Bernie Sanders, which doesn't require abrupt change or revolution. It just gradually develops and presents itself to the world. That is how they perceive society. Even for self-proclaimed anti-colonial organizations to have as your primary strategic goal the overturning of secondary contradictions or symptoms of the colonial capitalist system or the superstructure is to be for reform and against revolution. Revolution necessitates overturning the primary contradiction, which is concentrated in the base." And again, real revolutionary wouldn't find excuses to not get at the pig. Real revolutionaries wouldn't say we have to center all of our work around, everything that really gives us an excuse to not advance the struggle to seize state power. And that's real. This is not to say that assault on the base will not have immediate and permanent effect on the superstructure, including economic and political relationships that exist within the colonized proletariat population, like family, domestic division of labor and reproduction, commerce, social and political organization, and even horizontal violence is part of the superstructure and will, as we have seen in Ferguson and other examples, be liquidated when it is replaced or negated by revolutionary violence. Real shit. In fact, we have seen how the violent protests against the base that occurred in Ferguson, Minneapolis, and elsewhere resulted in a wave of reforms within police departments throughout the country, as well as introduction of reactionary laws by the bourgeoisie that restrict the rights of white citizenry to protest aspects of the superstructure. I say white people because them laws already exist for us. You know what I mean? The white people are the ones that say we should protest downtown. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but the reality is that the police occupy the black community. And it's in the black community where your right to for freedom of speech and peaceful assembly is violated every day. When the pigs roll up and say, get the fuck off the corner, etc., that is a violation of First Amendment right and the right for free assembly. But nobody ever addressed that shit. Nobody ever addressed that shit. You know what I mean? And they do it in a lot of different ways, like what I just described in terms of disruption. They don't always send the boys in blue. Sometimes they send other forces to carry out their work. But the reality is you have to explain why would you want to disrupt what the fuck going on right now? What contradiction are you attacking by silencing me? You know what I'm saying? Real shit, I want to know. I really do, because I make a self-criticism and I revise my ways if what you say makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes motherfuckers don't feel shit to, shots ring off and shit. Motherfuckers get killed. In fact, that's really the only way white power really fucking understands shit. And the base. As it relates to horizontal violence, when Ferguson Rebellion set off, for example, horizontal violence or superstructure hit an all-time low because the people was too busy fighting the state and parasitic institutions. In summation, it is impossible to call for an end to horizontal violence without organizing and calling for revolutionary violence. And it is impossible to call for revolution without calling for the destruction of the base of colonial capitalist society. This is true on a subjective and objective level, for we recognize the revolution requires the conscious participation of the proletariat, as well as the objective conditions in society, which include and rely upon more heavily than all others the existence of revolutionary organization in the form of the African People's Socialist Party, armed with advanced revolutionary theory, which is African internationalism. Genuine protracted mass resistance requires strategic planning, exploiting the contradictions that exist within the current relationship the state has to the community. That's why I raised the city council shit. It's not that we believe that if we was to get a fucking law passed that requires the police to act a certain way, that they're gonna follow that shit. I mean, they just talked about the real state power, you know, assuming that Danielle Outlaw and Larry Krasner, what they saying is 10th degree true in terms of this split and the rogue nature of the FOP, because it is possible that the FOP would act independent of the command of Outlaw. But the reality is that Outlaw operates under the command of a U.S. government and a colonial, which is a colonial imperialist force. And her job is to uphold colonial law, which will always be in contradiction, diametrically opposed to the African Revolution. And that's the bottom line, you know what I'm saying? But that doesn't mean that there are not splits within the colonial state apparatus itself, you know? And so, and that also, again, it applies to this question of when we say that we should intervene in the electoral process by gaining mass support for a law to be passed that would reflect the demands of Black community control of the police. They call it a ballot initiative, you know what I'm saying? That you can actually do by getting an X amount of signatures on a petition. Then you can have your own law placed on a ballot for general election. And you can also fight with the city council to put the same law on their agenda and struggle for the mayor to pass it. And again, this is not to say that we have any confidence in the ability of the colonial state to abide by the principles in the Black Community Control of Police ballot initiative, but it is a platform upon which we can begin to build Black community control of the police by winning the people to this particular strategy. And at the same time we do that, we build Black community control of police. We mobilize for our own security. You know what I'm saying? We be Black community control of police. How you doing? Yes, sir, brother. How you? How you doing, good brother? Hey, that's the word, beloved. All right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, bro. Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, and this is what we're putting forth, which is going to work. The road to revolution. So, yeah, again, this is not, you know, and this is the difference between reform as a tactic of revolution as opposed to reform as a tactic for reform, you know, and that's what the white left will always be, for reform in its true sense. However, there are ways to which we can advance the revolutionary goals and objectives by exploiting the institutions and the processes within the electoral process that give us the ability to raise up our own program on their own ballot, just like some revolutionaries have successfully run for office and shit like that. But this is even better than running somebody for office, because as opposed to the people being dependent on, you know, basically the loyalty of an individual, you know, because at any given time, people can change their minds. And I'm not coming at any politician, Black elected official. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's many in the Black is Black coalition that, you know, have stood firm for Black people for decades and shit. That's not what this is. But in the real world, to run a policy is it takes any subjectivity that may have once existed in terms of the ability for the opposition, for white power, to attempt to discredit the politic itself, because you're running for, you are voting for a policy which hinges upon independent and democratically elected organization of the Black working class itself. You know what I mean? So that's the beauty of the shit, you know? So we want to struggle for that shit. So the road to revolution. Currently, the African petty bourgeoisie, both radical and liberal, and the democratic socialists, aka the white left, have contained most struggle around the question of police repression within the electoral process. We understand this to be a concrete manifestation of the attempt by liberal bourgeoisie to facilitate the smooth transition that the chairman was criticizing the so-called revolutionaries and the democratic socialists for. You know, the smooth transition. Oh, it's going to work out on its own if you just run enough laws on the ballot, or if you just, get enough pigs on trial, then revolution will happen on its own. But in the real world, their strategy for revolution, or their definition of revolution, is simply activity. But there's no strategy towards the acquisition of power and the seizure of power, the relinquishment of power from one social force, which is the colonial capitalist ruling class, to the African proletariat. Ain't no strategy that the white left can put forth for that. Or the petty bourgeoisie. While food programs, housing programs, education programs, stop horizontal violence programs, etc., all have a place in the revolutionary process, when they are tied to a revolutionary strategy whose aim is seizure of state power by the proletariat, they are worthless to the revolution, and perhaps even harmful if that is all they are. The reality is that the bourgeoisie always has enough capital to provide more housing and food than the revolution can. And it has jails for perpetrators of horizontal violence. Like, it's not about the program as such. And, we see that right now, where you got Head Start. The Black Panther Party was the one that first started programs to feed African children and shit, and to educate African children in a different way, in a progressive way. And the U.S. government attacked and killed the Panthers, and then they start up 100,000 branches of Head Start, which keeps the people tied to colonialism. So the question isn't programs itself, because at any given moment, we build by just the virtue of the fact that we are a working class movement. We do not have the resources to do what the bourgeoisie can in terms of putting certain types of institutions on the ground. However, the institutions that the revolution puts on the ground, what makes them significant is their relationship to the revolutionary organization. That helps the people understand that if we get the power, then we can build all of this to the max, and we point to examples like Cuba and others in terms of the possibilities that revolution can bring. So the reality is that the bourgeoisie, the reality is that the bourgeoisie always has enough capital to provide more housing and food than the revolution can. Yeah, we said that. The task we are confronted with is building a mass social movement that makes the destruction of the base the strategic task of struggle that even occurs within the superstructure. This is the essence of the Black community control of police demand. The city council resolutions and ballot initiatives we struggle for must call for the destruction of the base, the immediate withdrawal of the occupying military from the oppressed and exploited African community, and the right to mobilize for our own security. Horizontal violence occurs in the absence of revolutionary theory and organizational leadership to define the concrete political objectives of armed struggle against the base and unity with the political struggle on the electoral front. Uhuru. So that's it, y'all. So we're going to be back here next week. Today was very fruitful in the sense that we are, gaining more traction, and, we have to keep moving. I'm self-critical for not having the up-to-date spear. And, last thing, there you go. I do have, for anybody who wants one, I have a few left, but we have this poster honoring our Black political prisoners I mentioned earlier. Like they want to talk about kidnapping and shit. That's, isn't that like outrageous? How the fucking media, they want you to worry about these fucking crackers in Haiti, and look at all these goddamn freedom fighters that they continue to hold captive. Real shit, we should be extremely offended at the fact we should be extremely offended. Like real shit. Like we should feel disrespected by the fact that they want us to be concerned about some fucking white missionaries when our goddamn revolutionaries is in their prison. It's wild. Shit wild. But that speaks to the task at hand. So we out. Uhuru, comrades. Hey, so if you want a poster, then say something in the chat room. All right? Uhuru. Oh man, that shit was excellent. That shit was flawless, dog. You know, I thought that was really good.